Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome to episode 62 of the Alec Walt Show. I'm your host, Alec Walt, alongside another very special guest, and today we're talking about the Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins have been very active this week, bringing back two familiar faces and signing a one-year contract to a restricted free agent. Today, I'm going to talk about all of those moves and more with Chris Nosek, the host of What's Bruin and Puck Off on JDF Sports. Chris, what's going on, man? Welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Long time no see.
Yeah, man, it's been a minute. So good time to have you on the show talking about the Boston Bruins. The Bruins were extremely active on Monday. They had two holes in their top six at the center spot. According to multiple reports, they have re-signed Patrice Bergeron to a one-year, $2.5 million contract with $2.5 million worth of incentives. They've also re-signed David Krejci to a one-year, $1 million contract worth $2 million in incentives. And their restricted free agent, Pavel Zacha's signed with the Bruins 1 year and $3.5 million. So, Chris, we're going to start with the news that broke yesterday morning with Patrice Bergeron and the Bruins. 1 year, $2.5 million. $2.5 million in incentives. There may not be a better contract in the league right now. That is an absolute steal for the Bruins and the 37-year-old forward.
Yeah, I think the only other one that you could even make the case for would be his teammate David Pastrnak, still with $6 million and change on his contract for one more year. But no, I mean, realistically, with what you get for Patrice Bergeron at $2.5 million, I mean, let's call it what it is. It's a $5 million deal. I think he knew the number, and just kind of before he went away on vacation, they communicated that to Sweeney and said, you let us know how you need to make it work. As long as I can make $5 million, I'm in. And Sweeney had to just make a few other phone calls. And I know everybody's been anxious and stressed and not been enjoying their summer. I mean, I have, because I knew this was going to happen. I've been nice and relaxed over it. But you had to know what the numbers were for Krejci and Zacha and get at least a ballpark for what a Pasternak's going to cost you for next year on that extension, because you need to carry some of it over. And we saw this, a move like this, bite them in the butt when it was Jerome McGinley, because he had money carry over, and you ended up having to ship Johnny Boychuk over to the Islanders to clear up the cap space to take on that bonus, the hit from the bonuses.
Luckily, the Bruins are getting a good deal here with him. And, you know, when I see his role next year, I see it no different than what I've seen the last couple of years. He's going to be our top line center, be one of the best defensive forwards in the NHL. The real only question I have when it comes to Patrice Bergeron is who his two specific line mates are going to be to start the year. We'll get into line construction very soon. But, Chris, I look at these depth charts, seeing him back at the top, and specifically the man who's now right there behind him with David Krejci. I mean, it feels great to have the band back together for at least one last season here with the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, I think Krejci coming back, it really does bring more of the questions. What was really going on with former head coach Bruce Cassidy? You know, David Krejci did kind of have some parting shots, if you will, on his way back to the Czech Republic about David Pastrnak finally getting time on the second line and not while he was there. So it really does bring those questions back up. How much did a new head coach in Jim Montgomery play in a role in how much he was willing to re-sign for? I mean, you think about it, he's signing for $3.5 million overall, because let's face it, none of these incentives are going to be really hard for either one of these guys to hit. So for $3.5 million, when he was on a $7 million contract, he took half the money after a year off, and he left his family in the Czech Republic. So there's no light moves in doing that. So I for me, at least, it begs the question, what was really going on there? And I think some of it had to do with the frustration of, you know, having such inconsistency on his wings for so long. You know, from, you know, Nathan Horton all the way through to finally having a winger in Pastrnak that he's not playing with. You know, I think he learned last year that as much as it was fun playing at home, playing in Boston is going to be that much more fun. And now that he's got a new head coach, he's willing to give it another shot.
So do you like the Montgomery ad?
I do. I was
outside
actually
of the fact that the players are significantly happier.
So last year, right around the Christmas break, I was talking to Kevin, my co-host on What's Bruin, and starting to ask the question, how much longer does Bruce Cassidy have with this team? When do we start looking at him? Because Bruce Cassidy was always hesitant to break up the Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak line and separate that scoring. And then he finally had to coming into January, and look what we saw. And if we had a full season of Hall, and Pastrnak, they would have been much better positioned in that playoff race as a whole. Instead, they did a lot more to play around with the lineup at the beginning of the season, which did have to be done. Let's not excuse that was not, you didn't know what you had with Erik Haula for sure, but you knew there was potential there. But it took until January, it took until the COVID break for them to even think about trying it, when their hand was kind of forced, and you had to put DeBrusk back up top to kind of fill in that right side wing. And that kickstarted DeBrusk. There was all the tumultuous wording, if you will, whatever you want to call it. I know a lot of it was his contract when it came to DeBrusk and the team, but I think playing a third line role didn't help his mental status in that whole situation. I just think it was starting to get kind of obvious that message from Cassidy was getting worn out. And, when you saw Backes leave, there were some small shots taken there as far as, how the team was coached. Krejci, same thing. And I do think there was something to it. Now that you see that the players are that much more excited, guys like Krejci are coming back, for crying out loud. I think there was something to it. We'll never know the extent of it. The guys are not going to, that's one thing this locker room is really good at. They're not going to let all that stuff get out. Mm-hmm. But I do think it was worse than we're being told.
Yeah. I mean, we'll definitely wait and see what happens. But Chris, another bonus to returning to Boston this year is, I don't care how good you are, how old you are, how many years you had off. Heck, you and me could play center with Hall and Pastrnak as our wings. I mean, that's another huge reason why I think he's coming back, is because if Marchand's healthy, and if they bring back that top line last year, you got to do, like, Erik Haula was sick last year next to them, and Krejci's significantly better. Now, Krejci's older, sure, and I'm not going to say he's 10 years younger than he is right now. But one thing I do think has with Krejci coming back is by 2-3 months into the year, he could be dishing passes to two elite wings on the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, and I know you wanted to get to the line combination shortly because we do have one more contract to go over. But you, with the chemistry that he has with Pastrnak, I know it hasn't fully bloomed the way that people have wanted to see, the way that Pastrnak, blossomed with Pastrnak and Bergeron. But there is chemistry between those two, and there's a ton of chemistry between Hall and Pastrnak. So giving those three guys some time to gel, they will become your top scoring line if it all clicks. And Hall, as great as Haula was last year, Krejci is easily 10 times the passer that Haula is, and 10 times the setup man. He's just not as fast. But the game goes slower for him. So even if he's 2 or 3 strides behind Pastrnak and Hall, he can lead the pass better than Haula could. So like his mental abilities within the game are going to be able to make up for where he is physically slower. Also, he's that much older. So his game is going to, I think, translate to be better between those two. And they're both going to just feed right off of it. I think you could see, a 35, 40 goal season minimum, probably a 50 goal season from Pastrnak if he plays with them all season and they're all remaining healthy.
Yeah, so just so we can get into our line construction here, the third deal that happened today, Pavel Zacha signed 1 year, $3.5 million as a restricted free agent. He was traded for Erik Haula, who I mentioned minutes ago here on this podcast. What do you like about the addition? How do you think he helps his team? And for $3.5 million, what are your thoughts now that you know the contracts and you think of those two players swapping teams with Haula and Zacha?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely sold high on Haula, and you got someone that has a much higher ceiling, plays the same two positions, and is 7 years younger. Zacha was never really put in a position to thrive over in New Jersey. I think some of that will be alleviated by the fact that he'll have some semblance of a set role once the team is healthy. I think while they're out, while Marchand is out, I think you'll see him on that top line next to Bergeron and DeBrusk because for two reasons. For two reasons. One, you want to give the Hall, Krejci, Pastrnak line as much time together as possible. Two, Zacha will move back down to that third line when Marchand becomes healthy. You don't want DeBrusk to be moved from the left side over to the right side and back again. You don't want that to keep happening. And in this instance, if you move Zacha down and slide Marchand in, you're only changing your third line. You're not making any other moves once you get Brad Marchand back. And Zacha, what better way to put him in a position to succeed with this brand new team than putting him with Patrice Bergeron as his centerman?
I don't know, man. Hall, Bergeron, DeBrusk sounds pretty good. And
it does.
Three, if Zacha plays their second line, they're all from the same country.
Correct, and that could work out as well.
I
think right now, if you want to have Krejci, Pastrnak, and Hall as a pairing, as a line all season, I think you start with that, because even though Zacha, Krejci, and Pastrnak they may end up even being a better 3-person tandem, because Zacha plays a little bit different from Hall. He's got chemistry with Pastrnak because they play on the Czech team together. Like you said, they're all countrymen. So there's a little bit more there for them to kind of have off the ice, if you will. And the chemistry off the ice certainly affects what you see on the ice. So I just think to start the season, if you want to have the strongest lineup when everybody becomes healthy, you need to make minimal changes as possible. And sliding Zacha from the top line left wing next to Bergeron to the third line left wing next to Coyle is a minimal change.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you there. I think I see Zacha, Bergeron, DeBrusk, and I don't know. I mean, I think that second line is going to be awesome. If I'm Jim Montgomery, I'm starting with Hall on the top line and Zacha on the second. I think they're going to get so much power play minutes together as well that I do think they'll have chemistry when those lines do go back together. But man, if I'm losing a Brad Marchand level player on that top line, I want to make sure I have the offensive production to replace that. And I don't think Zacha can get anything close to that. If I'm expecting Bergeron to be that top line center and Krejci play second, I'm all in on having Taylor Hall start on that first line.
So the other thing that what we're having this conversation about, as much as people want to bash all over Don Sweeney as a general manager, you have all of these options. Jim Montgomery can roll all of these options out in the preseason to see what works best, to see what the best option is when you have Marchand on the shelf. If anybody else gets hurt, what if Taylor Hall goes down? Then obviously we presume Zacha is going to go in and fill that role. What if he's not the best fit, though? But what if he's not the best fit for whatever reason?
And you move to DeBrusk.
Then you would have to make that DeBrusk switch.
Yeah.
Right. But you have that as an option because of how this team is constructed. Do you want to move DeBrusk from his off wing to his on wing to his off wing again? No, ideally you don't. But I think with the contract that he has, the new mindset that he's in, I think he's better able to make that transition this year than he was back in 2020, for sure.
Yeah, and he has chemistry already with Bergeron.
Correct. Yes.
After having the time with him last year on that line with Brad Marchand. So I think DeBrusk in position, because think of it, he ended the season last year with a 25-goal season, I believe. And I feel like for over half of that season, he was below 10 goals. I mean, his goal explosion didn't really happen till about 3 weeks before the trade deadline.
He really took off once he hit that top line right wing with Bergeron and Marchand.
And it was right before the trade deadline.
And it was correct. Right when they needed it, he was able to turn it on. He had like 16 goals in like 24 games or something ridiculous like that. It was a ton of points in a short period of time, which great to see from him. The question now that you have is, because he's had 2 really good years, his rookie year and last year in that time space, can he put it all together? And this is the year that he can prove that he can put it all together. Now, we're going over all this, and we don't know what shoe drops next. Because right now, with the way this team is constructed, they're just over $2 million over the cap now. Mm-hmm. And they have plenty of time to get back cap compliant, but they need to dump a contract, and they need to dump $2 million. So the question then becomes, what's the next move? What if DeBrusk is that next move? Now he no longer becomes an option, and now you're looking at a guy like Craig Smith filling in on the top line. However, what if Craig Smith is the option that gets moved out? Do they find a trade partner that they can just attach a early round pick to Nick Foligno and get rid of that money? What is the next move to not only get cap compliant, but to finish, what is this roster going to look like?
I mean, before the deadline, I was kind of pro DeBrusk trade. I think after the two contracts that were just signed by those two centers, DeBrusk is not going anywhere.
I don't think so. I think he wants to be here. I think you've seen enough of
That's why I don't
think
he's going anywhere.
I don't think he's the one that goes. I think you could see potentially even two moves. I think it's a foregone conclusion that Chris Wagner gets DFA'd again. Because no one's going to take that contract on no matter what you attach to it. It's not worth it. It's got 1 year left. Craig Smith right now is one of your more movable pieces. I don't see them moving on from Grizz or Riley just yet. I think one of them is more of a move at the deadline. Once you have a better idea of what a guy like Jack Ashawn gives, you see what he has and how well does Jakub Zboril come back from the knee injury. Once you have those questions on defense answered, then you can determine whether Clifton is the guy to go, Riley, Grzelcyk, or even Zboril himself are the guys to go. I like Zboril. I hope they keep him around. He's on a great contract right now. You've got Mason Lohrei coming down the pipeline. You've got some other young defensemen. This team is okay depth-wise when it comes to defensemen, but right now you need the veteran guys on this team. You don't want to test that depth too much before you have to. You want to let those guys continue to develop. And that makes a guy like Craig Smith, can you get the same production from Mark McLaughlin or Jack Studnicka that you can get from Craig Smith? I think you can.
There's a lot that I still think needs to be done. Obviously, clearly you mentioned the cap situation. Something will be done. But, with that still not yet decided because the roster is the way it is right now, you see the Bruins right now. They brought back their two familiar faces. They officially agreed to terms with Pavel Zacha. They have their new head coach. They're injured to start the year, which makes me question what their potential seed could be in the playoffs. I'm kind of more on the lower end when it comes to the Bruins because, obviously not having Charlie McAvoy and Brad Marchand to start the season is certainly something that needs to be in consideration when looking at where this team could go for next year. But with an older Bergeron and Krejci coming back, Chris, with the roster for the most part looking like it will for this upcoming season, in your opinion, what is the ceiling for the 2022-2023 Boston Bruins?
I mean, first and foremost, their goal is obviously going to be to make the playoffs, and this is still a playoff team. When you look at the Atlantic Division, the Red Wings have gotten better. The Canadiens have gotten better. The Senators have all gotten better. But on paper, this team is still better than all of them. And the Buffalo Sabres, same thing. I don't know how much they've really gotten better. I still think they're going to be a basement dweller in this division. No one really takes them all that seriously at this point. And until they eat up more of that $20 million in cap space, it's no one's going to take them that serious. But Detroit's getting a lot better. The Canadiens have gotten a lot better, and the Senators have gotten a lot better. But this team on paper is still better than those three. So right there, you're looking at least a fourth place team. Now, when you look at what the other teams in this division have to go through, Florida's $4 million over the cap. The Lightning are almost $8 million over the cap, and the Maple Leafs are almost $1.5 million over the cap. So as much as we want to say we're not a finished roster product, neither of those three teams. The one that's going to get gutted the most financially is going to have to be the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're going to have to piece together almost $8 million, which means at least two guys, maybe three, are going to have to get dealt off. And they've already lost Ryan McDonough on that blue line. So that makes me look at them and say they're not going to be as good as they were last year, period. The last 3 years.
Still don't want to play them.
They can't be. Correct.
I still do not want to play the Lightning.
But what are the pieces that they lose? Can they fill them in with $800,000 players? They have before. That's the part that makes me worried about this team is they've done it before. So they can do it again. The Maple Leafs, $1.5 million. Their goaltending is still going to be a little bit shaky. It's a little bit better. But when it comes down to the playoffs, I still don't trust this team. Get past the first round. I don't care what place they finish in.
A series. I would love to play them in a series.
I think anybody would. This team can't get past the first round. They can't buy their way past the first round. But they still got to move another piece because they're not yet cap compliant. I think they could be the team that wins the division just because we've seen what their offense can carry them to. Florida, I think they got worse with the way that they gave up Uyghur on defense in that Kachuk deal. I think they could be your third. I think the way this division ends up falling, you could see Toronto first, probably Tampa second, Boston third, and Florida fourth.
I think Florida's still going to be really damn good.
They're going to be damn good for sure, but their cap situation, they got to get rid of $4 million plus. And they got rid of Mackenzie Weegar, a top 4 defenseman, so that the defense in front of Bobrovsky is going to be even more shaky than it was, and he's still Sergei Bobrovsky.
So next year's going to be fun. The Bruins certainly look a hell of a lot better this week than they did last week, finally coming to an agreement with Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. Chris, before I let you go, of course, man, how can our listeners here keep in touch with you and all of your content?
Absolutely. So we're still rocking and rolling over on JDF Sports. Monday nights, we've got What's Bruin and Out of Bounds with Dylan James. On Wednesdays, we've got Puck Off. And on every other Friday, we have House of Cards featuring the Modern Collector and Hat-Trick Hobbies. Mike Pollock and John Hendren do a great job of going over the hobby of sports collecting, whether it's cards, memorabilia, stuff like that. Great new show that we've added with that crew there. And obviously Out of Bounds with Dylan James is rocking and rolling with football season coming along. Everything's going to be rocking and rolling every week, all 4 shows pretty much as football season and hockey season are right around the corner.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, definitely check out all of your content over there. JDF Sports, you guys are killing it. I check out your hockey shows all the time. Love your Bruins show. Obviously, your hockey show is something I'll listen to all the time. You and Dylan, freaking love that kid. So
yeah, we'll have to have you on again soon.
Yeah, you do a really good job over there, man. So keep up the great work. And of course, man, I can't thank you enough for joining me here on Down the Block Sports.
Thanks for having me. Keep up the great work over here too.
I appreciate it, man. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of the Alec Walt Show. I'm Alec Walt alongside Chris Nosek. What do you think of the moves the Boston Bruins have made here in free agency? What do you think their ceiling is for the 2022-23 season? Feel free to give your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more of my exclusive content. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you very soon.